Wisdom comes in many forms. Today we're going to hear from a lady who firmly believes that everybody is psychic. There is no doubt that with age and more life experience, our beliefs often become more defined. And that's important because it's our beliefs that shape our experience of the world. They shape our reality. So if you're here as a beginner dowser or somebody who is just starting to experience the reality that's just the other side of what's usually perceptible through our day-to-day senses, then my guest today will help you understand more about what is happening in your world and what you're discovering. Barbara Delong is an empath, a sensitive and an ordained spiritual minister. She interacts with all aspects of the world around her with a sense of humour and joy, as you'll see. So sit back and listen to this very enjoyable conversation in which we discuss how we can all interact every day by being more in sync with nature and Mother Earth. And watch what happens when we start to discuss nature, spirits and elementals later in the interview. You're a medium, an empath, that's how you describe yourself. You're a non-denominational minister. You're a podcast host, and as far as I can tell, you're generally a very happy soul. Can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit about yourself so that my viewers get an idea of who you are? Who's Barbara?
Well, I taught special education for 25 years and had a wonderful accident in my late 40s that made it impossible for me to continue teaching. So happily, I came full time into this field a lot earlier than a lot of other people have. And it was probably the best thing that could have happened to me in my life. Now, it did give me vertigo. So for a long time, I was on the ground more than I was upright. But the cool thing was I seriously thought of contacting carpet companies, because I figured since I was on the ground, I could inspect the piles and I might be able to make some money on it. Didn't work out. But it was a good thought, I thought. It was interesting because prior to the accident, people had told me, you should be doing this full time. And I kept saying to them, look, when I retire, happily will I do it full time. But there's no way in this field I will make what I'm making with 2 master's degrees teaching. And I said, I think this is a good lesson for everybody. Don't say things like, well, when I retire, I'll do this. Because if it's supposed to happen, the universe figures we're not going to wait for that. We'll just give her an accident so she has to retire. And that's what happened. So I did readings for a very long time, and then I realized that being a psychic was only a stepping stone in a spiritual pathway. It was not the goal. So I kind of slowed down, although I still do readings, but I do more writing now. I did a documentary with my late husband on the secrets of the stones. It was going to be for the History Channel, but he croaked, so it didn't make it there, but it is still on YouTube and it's archiving beautifully. And then I put a website up, and the website just kept growing, so the website is now huge. And then I was in a class for spiritual development, and one of the homework assignments was to do a mandala for a friend in the class. And I didn't know what mandalas were, but as soon as I figured out what they were, I drew one, and then other people wanted them, and then other people wanted them, and that snowballed. And that evolved into, I think there are over 500 of them around the world now.
Right.
And then I decided that maybe a deck of cards utilizing a spiritual outlook instead of the traditional form that I couldn't relate to. And so I included the chakras, but I renamed them because I couldn't pronounce the Indian words. So I renamed them. And stretched stuff a little bit, and the cosmic deck of initiation was born. And 6 months from the first drawing, I signed a contract for them to be published, and they were published for 20 years, and they're out there all over the place. And lately, I've decided to make an app for the telephone out of it, but it just, things seem to keep snowballing for me. There's no stop. So I'm along for an amazing ride, and every now and then I have to stop and catch my breath. So spiritually speaking, with the radio show, the podcast, it's my master's. No, it's not my master's. I have 2 of those. It's my PhD program. I find topics I'm interested in.
Right.
I find an expert in the field who's written a book, read the book, and then talk the author into tutoring me for 2 hours on a podcast. So I have learned a tremendous amount. I've spoken to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of authors, and I'm having such a wonderful time. It's not work.
Yeah, no, I could see. Yeah, I could see that. And speaking to you earlier in the week, it was very obvious that you really enjoy what you're doing, which is fabulous. We had a chance to have a talk about geomancy and dowsing and house healing and all of that stuff. And one of the things that you mentioned, there were many points that I'm actually going to pick up from that conversation and just ask you to expand on. One of the points that you mentioned was actually a little story about when you moved into a house and at the bottom of the garden there was what was effectively a dry riverbed, as far as I understand it, when you moved in. But you were saying how water has always been important in your life. Do you want to just pick up that story from that point?
Oh, sure. I've always been a water person. I went to school in Michigan and wasn't around a lot of water. Although the Great Lakes are there, I wasn't close. And learned early on that being close to water was important to me. And we lived by the water for 50 years in New York. And when I was moving to Nashville to be closer to my son and my grandchildren, there were several priorities. One was the fireplace, a working fireplace, and the other was to be by water. And when I found the condominium that I wanted, I called my son and I sent him over to look at it, and he said, "Do you want to fly out and check it out?" And I said, "Nope, that's it, and just buy it." And the only thing was, there's no major body of water here. There's the Cumberland River, and I'm not by that. And I just felt that it would be okay. And after I moved in, I walked around it's a very small, there are only 14 units here. And there was what appeared to be a little brook bed or, a bed. And my son, I said, "Oh, look, there's a stream." And he said, "Mom, that's a drainage ditch." And I said, No, it's a stream bed. And within weeks, the stream started to flow, and it hasn't stopped. And, my son says, "Well, you must have a lot of runoff water." And it's like, it's a stream. It's really a stream, John. And it is. And people say, geez, there hasn't been water in that area for a very long time. And I said, well, it was important for me to have water somewhere near, more than a broken pipe. And so it's out there, and it's got I can see it from my condo. It's just delightful that I have running water right behind me, which, the only thing that would make it better would be if it was salt water, but that was not confusing.
Yeah, you don't want to be wishing that one too much. Then anything could happen, I think.
I'll take fresh water.
Yeah. So really, that's like an example of how the universe has provides and does provide for, and can provide for absolutely everybody in that sense. Do you feel?
Well, it's interesting because I have always fed the birds wherever I was. And in the Connecticut home, I fed them until I realized I was not feeding the birds, I was feeding the bears. Um, and frankly, I couldn't afford to feed the bears. But when I moved in here, I put I looked, I knew there were birds, but I put a bird feeder out and sat there for, I guess, 3 or 4 hours the first day, seeing cardinals come. And I just was focusing on, let's get the birds here. And within a day, I think the last time I counted, I had 24 cardinals in the trees waiting to feed at the feeder. So a good example of, people go to gyms to exercise, to get muscles, to do all of the stuff, and they're really dedicated to that. But what people don't understand is our consciousness is so powerful. We can make so much happen if with a loving, kind heart, you focus on something. You can't change another person and you can't make people do things, but to enhance your reality, you certainly can use the power of your consciousness to draw stuff to you. And it's an amazing tool that most people don't utilize. I mean, meditation is a very lovely tool, and it does work, but also the fact that even not in a meditative state, if you're visualizing something constantly and you put it out there with good positive intent, it does happen.
Are you finding with the people that you meet and all those that you interview and generally in your life, are you finding that that the connection to the manifesting ability, if I put it like that, is ramping up? That's the easiest way to put it these days. Have you noticed a change for people generally?
Oh, I would say that probably over the last couple of years, the energetic field that we're drawing from has ramped up tremendously. And I think that if people even connect with the earth, Schumann energy is the best energy you can touch into, and that's earth energy. And if you walk barefoot on the ground in the summertime, of course, but to attach yourself to the earth energy, what it does is it synchronizes your heartbeat to the earth energy, which makes you a healthier person.
Because that's something that you mentioned. I can't remember whether it was actually in the conversation where we were on air or whether it was afterwards, that you mentioned that you do actually do that as a matter of course. You deliberately focus to synchronize your heart to the earth. Is that right?
Yeah, it's being, let's face it, we are connected to the earth energy. The earth is our home for this particular time, and to not be in connection to it takes something away from you. If you take a look at the early people that were here, they walked barefoot. They didn't have arthritis. They didn't have all sorts of illnesses, of course, until the Europeans invaded. Mm. But if they had any ailment at all, it was a natural cure that they utilized. And I'm thinking seriously of starting to create a library here of old homeopathic medicines, because they work a lot better than, look at apple cider vinegar. Vermont farmers found that their cows that ate green apples in the wintertime didn't have arthritis. So they suggested to their wives that they try apple cider vinegar for their arthritis. And it is a common remedy for arthritis today. Or you can get pills that have the apple cider vinegar in it, but apple cider vinegar and a couple of teaspoons of hot water and some honey and maybe a little whiskey, and any way you want to take it, it's good for you. So rather than going with the chemicals, go with the natural and you'll be healthier.
Oh, yeah, quite. Yes. Sorry, I was only smiling because I was thinking back to a couple of years ago when I made a decision not to go with the natural, and that was probably one of the most stupid things I've done in my life. But moving on, so as a medium, as an empath, this is something that you were born with. This is something that's part of you, isn't it? So, when did you? Did you as a little girl, did you feel different to other people, or was it just something that were always you, and that was that? And because some empaths find it hard going as a little youngster.
Yeah, I think I was always a little different. Always very gregarious, always spoke my mind, not wisely. Always knew a little too much, but just enough to get into trouble. I would say that my childhood was one of more isolation from choice, because my interests and my views just didn't go along with everybody else's. So, but it's a really good question you ask, because personally, I believe that some lifetimes we're not meant to utilize our skills, and some lifetimes we are. So that often people who go to schools and classes to become a medium or an empath or a shaman, they can get techniques, but there's a magic in there somehow that you're born with. And if you enhance the magic, then all sorts of cool things happen. So I'm not, everybody is psychic. Everybody can improve upon that aspect of themselves. Oftentimes people just don't trust it, so that they don't go with it enough to figure out that they really have a gift. When I started studying in the spiritual church, at some point we did an evening, the whole class did an evening presentation for the whole congregation. And I was assigned to do the platform mediumship. And I told the minister, I'm faking this, right? And he said, no, you're not faking it. You're gifted. And I said, no, I'm faking. and if you're really worried about it, see the audience, have friends and give friends messages, and you'll be fine. So being insecure, I had 6 friends. I gave them all $20. I said, we'll get together afterwards and, we'll go out and celebrate. And so when it came to be my turn to stand up, confidently I stood up, turned around, and not one of them were there. They started celebrating ahead of me. So I called on people and just gave them whatever came to my mind. And afterwards, everybody came up and said, that was amazing. I can't believe you said that. Nobody knew that. And I looked at the minister and he just, raised an eyebrow. And I said, you realize I was faking? And he said, no, you're a natural at this. And I said, no, I was faking. It took him 7 years to convince me that if I just trusted, the right thing came out.
That's really interesting, because I thought that you were actually going to say, in answer to that question, that you were, you just took it in your stride and you knew about it and you developed and you accepted it right from the start. That's really interesting that you actually found it difficult to accept that this was your natural talent.
Well, I made good guesses all over the place. I said the right thing at the right time in many cases. Never, it was just natural to me. It didn't feel as though it was coming from someplace different. So that doing that, giving messages to people, especially from spirit, there's big responsibility there. And I didn't want to take credit for something that I thought was, just whatever came to my mind. There was no, there was no preparation, there was no prayer, there was no cleansing, there was no candles, there was no chanting, there was nothing, just zap right out. And apparently, after 50 some years, I guess I'm fortunate to be a natural in a lot of instances, and so that I don't make money on this stuff. I do readings, but they're spiritually, they're spiritual readings. If you want to know when you're going to find the love of your life, don't come to me, because I'll tell you that you'll find the love of your life when you become the person you want to attract to you. It's all up to you. And don't ask me about, are you going to be a millionaire? Probably not. I'll give you spiritual information. I'll give you spiritual insight, but I'm not a psychic. There's some of that in it, I know, but that's not my calling. And frankly, somebody once said to me, what do your followers think about what you've done with all of the spiritual stuff you've done in the years? And I said, I would be horrified to think that anybody's following me because I don't know where I'm going.
Right. But you recognize that you don't need to know where you're going.
Well, if I knew where I was going, it wouldn't be a fun trip.
Do you feel as though your life is guided in a particular direction by the management, as we would call it, as I would call it?
I believe that we all come from the same source, and that we all have a seed of that source inside of us. And that's what I call our spirit. We have body, mind, spirit. Body, everybody figures that out. Mind, some people call the soul. That's what I call the mind. And that's your personality, that's your ego, that's the intellect that you utilize this lifetime. The body and the soul are only for a lifetime. The spirit is what travels through time. And that spirit will guide you if you listen, will arrange coincidences and synchronicities. And in that aspect, yes, I feel that the guidance comes from the seed of the source that I carry through this lifetime. I don't think there's an old man with a white beard out there, looking over through the clouds and saying, "Oh, look what Barbara's doing now." No, I think that we have free will. We have a part of the infinite, the source within us that guides us constantly. And yeah, I do believe in that way. Yes, there's a guidance system. We just don't all listen to it all the time.
You're too right. Yes, we definitely don't all listen to it. In fact, sometimes people are making their experience of this life extremely difficult by almost going the opposite way and forcing out any guidance that appears to be trying to help them. Would you agree? Have you come across people like that?
I think that there are people whose egos are so strong, they smother out the spirit. And it's like, no, I have to earn money. No, I have to do this. No, I know that this is what is expected of me. This is what I was told I should do. And even though it doesn't feel right, I'm going to do it anyway. That's the ego talking. And, yes, there are people whose egos have gotten to the point where they're narcissistic, and they're not going to let the spirit through. And the spirit, while we have free will, the spirit is probably whispering, is sending messages, and the ego is saying, no, don't be silly. You know better than that. You can't possibly be getting a message from your spirit. Listen to me. And I will admit that there have been times when I've said or done something that I'm pretty sure was not in the best interest of spiritual evolution. I have often said I may have to spend an extra lifetime down here, but this is so worth it. I'm going to do it anyhow. So couple of times for sure. But we're here to make mistakes, so you might as well make a couple of good ones.
Yes, but okay. Yes, we're definitely, I completely get that we're definitely here to learn and to make mistakes. That is the best way to learn, of course.
But if you were perfect, you wouldn't be here.
No, absolutely. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we're here to follow, just what's that expression? It's just to enjoy, to embody joy. And really, from my point of view, as in the sort of work that I do with people, with my clients, it's about helping them recognize that actually we're transmuting, we're changing, we're transposing the lower, heavier energies of the detrimental stuff that drags us down and makes us feel absolutely crap, and other people crap as well, into things that make us feel positive and make us and bring joy into that environment. And this is what I was sort of alluding to, really, about your you being a happy soul. Your joy of life is clear. It's there, there's no disputing it, which must be rather wonderful. I'm not sure, there's not a question in there, so don't worry, relax on that one.
Okay.
One of the things you were talking about just now was about the fact that, if we follow the hints, follow the clues, follow the signs that the universe is giving us, and we actually listen to it, and maybe even listen to those quiet voices, that come from spirit, then there's a way that the whole process kind of just gently grows in effectiveness, and it kind of embraces us more for the longer that we do it. The process is there, and in a way, I'm thinking a lot about an interview you did recently with Joseph Selby, the author of The Physics of God, who I spoke to recently as well. Great guy, loved the way that he communicates. He gets really complex ideas across in very simple ways. So he would look at that and say that's neuroplasticity in action. If we follow the lead, and then our connection improves. Yeah. Would you say that that's something that you kind of have embodied in that sense, that concept?
Well, I've spoken with him a number of times too.
Okay.
He's been on the show for a couple of books. I think he's due back again too.
Right.
I think people like him have to use their own vocabulary. And he's a scientist. And that's the only way he can explain something he can't understand. I mean, I totally agree with a lot of his philosophy, but I'm more on the spiritual side of it, that there is no explanation, it's faith. Okay. And he can't explain faith. He can explain consciousness. And I mean, I love his material too. And his material is perfect for a lot of people who just cling to the need of a scientific explanation.
Right.
and that's okay. It's not my pathway, but I mean, I can talk to him. I can philosophically speak with him and make connections and stuff like that. But to my mind, Amit Goswami has been on my show a couple of times. Another scientist, and they go to great stretches to they finally acknowledge there's consciousness, and they don't put the spirit with it. It's just consciousness. There's no, they don't talk about spirits. And to me, consciousness is the spiritual energy that's inside of me and you and everybody. And it moves on. Consciousness has nothing to do with the ego or the soul or the physical. And so, but I think it's wonderful that they acknowledge there's consciousness now, finally.
Oh yeah, yeah. Science is trying to drag it in there, definitely. So faith. How would you quantify faith then, Barbara?
Well, there is knowing something, and then there's believing something. And knowing is a conscious, a physical thing. You can reason it in your brain. You can justify something and know it. But believing in something is a knowingness that goes beyond the physical. I know there are spirits. I talk to them. I know there are energies. I know there are elementals. When I had my car accident, one of the things, because there was a huge lawsuit, one of the things they asked me to do was to go for psychiatric evaluation. And when they did the test, there was a written test. And I looked at it, and the doctor that was giving it to me, I said, "Is this a setup?" And he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "First question, do you hear voices?" "Uh-huh." "Do you have visions?" "Yeah." "Do you ever feel like somebody's following you?" Because of the accident, I was being followed. And, he knew me, and he knew what I did. And he looked at me and he said, "Barb, just be honest. It's something they're just requiring of you." And so the result came back. Either I was 100% accurate in what I was saying, or I was the best fake they'd ever seen.
Right.
So faith is etheric. It has no solidity. There's no way to prove it. There's a way to live it, but there's no way to scientifically point to it and say that was faith or that was stupid. I mean, it's just, faith is an aspect that you learn to lean on when there's no one or nothing else to lean on. And we all have it, but we don't all use it.
But I guess also what you're saying is that it's something that's there not only for the times, the hard times, the tough times, which we have to admit is quite often when spirit makes its entry into somebody's life, is when they're at the lowest of the low, and that they have a spiritual awakening, as we would call it. And you have to ask the question, well, did they have to be that low in order to be open to spirit coming in? But we'll come back to that in a second. Maybe you want to talk on that a sec. But faith is something that even in the good times is present, because that's what helps you feel actually life is good, despite how much the external environment tries to make you think, well, no, it's not good. It's actually terrible. But we know, surely faith is there all the time, not just for the hard times.
When we incarnate, when the spirit comes into the embryo, whenever it is, and everybody has a different opinion, it brings with it a roadmap of those challenges that it has in mind to work on this lifetime. And that blueprint is integrated into the DNA of the embryo. So in a lifetime, we draw to us circumstances that will allow us to work on those aspects. And usually when, I call them 2x4 moments, or times when the dark night of the soul is looming, it's sort of like, this is an amazing challenge. I must be at a threshold place of some sort. What the hell was I thinking? And you got to be kidding me. And it's all right, so let's work this out, because if we don't work it out, it'll come back. And once is enough. And I think it's attitude on how you approach those dark nights of the soul. Everybody has them. It's those times when you feel alone, even though you're in a crowd, when you know people are listening but not hearing you, they don't understand how bad it is, and you don't have the support system you thought you had. And those are wonderful learning experiences to say to yourself, I'm not really alone. I'm really a spirit in this physical body. So actually, this isn't really happening to the physical. And to my spirit, it's happening to the physical. And what was I thinking? And, all right, so where is the lesson? And the lesson is always positive. It's not, don't put your hand in the fire again, you idiot. It's, there's something more spiritual going on here. Am I not laughing enough? Am I in the wrong? Lots of times that happens when you're in the wrong profession. And you're suddenly so miserable and nothing's working, and you haven't recognized the fact that if nothing is working, and maybe you're not working in the right place. And sometimes it's relationship. Sometimes you're in a relationship that you just don't understand. And what's the other person thinking? And the reality is there's something here to learn. Pay attention. And maybe it's to learn that not everybody is perfect for you. Or maybe it's that this person has things they need to do that don't involve me, and I have to back off and get on. And lots of times relationships, people don't even follow their own dreams. They think I have to help my partner realize their dreams, mine don't count. That's baloney. Yours count. And so long as everybody's following their dreams, following their bliss, whatever you want to call it, relationships work. So no matter how bad it gets, it's only a learning situation you pull to yourself. So you have nobody to blame but yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it could be a bit tricky to put those sort of sentiments into language that is not painful for somebody to hear. But if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes, isn't it? It's all about seeing the positive in what can appear completely bleak, as you say. It can, these situations.
I think too the hardest part of it is you can't help a person or tell them how to get out of a situation they're in, because you can only speak from your own frame of reference that is not theirs. So when people come to me with those kind of situations, I will listen to them forever. And when they finally pause for breath and say, what do you think? My answer to them is, I know you're spiritual, and I know you will do the right thing at the right time in the right way.
There's also, though, an aspect of, which is what we do this as house healers. We ask the management, we ask spirit to be with that person as best that they can, within alignment with that whole process of divine will, as we would call it. So so in that sense, there is, I mean, it really is just expressing love, isn't it, and compassion to a fellow human being, to say, right, come on, there's these wonderful fields of energy that we can't even comprehend how amazing they are, that are there. as well as there being other beings kind of emanating and linked to those fields
Yeah.
as well as us. But we're kind of quite low in the matter vibration aspect of it, is the way I feel. So there are all these beings out there that are actually there for us if we are willing to ask for help, I suppose.
Absolutely. But also there is free will and an ego. And sometimes people will change for a time and then sink back into old habits. And I mean, absolutely, when you surround somebody with all of that gooey good stuff for a time, you know, but it's up to them if they want to, if they accept the change and start working on it themselves to manifest their own field. And you know, absolutely, if you can show them how wonderful it is, and they choose to go down that pathway, that's wonderful. But we can't heal another person. We can give them a respite. We can surround them with love. We can listen to them forever. But the reality is, it's their job. It's their responsibility. And especially with what you do, I think what you do with houses and energetic fields and people is wonderful. Now, when you're working with energetic fields, you can change the course of a stream, absolutely. But there has to be support for that change.
Yeah. That does indeed. It does, and that is something that we often have to remind ourselves, is that the change comes, exactly as you said, the change comes from within the individual person, but there's a huge amount of support for that change to move forward in a positive sense. Elementals was something I said that we would be talking about today. We've talked about a lot of stuff that's not anything to do with elementals. Where do you see nature spirits kind of fitting into all of this that we have talked about with spirituality and consciousness and all of that?
Well, elementals are fun. They often give me problems, but they are challenges. I know when my mother passed away, the family all gathered the day after, and we were in the house and everybody was somber, and I was just so relieved that she was at peace. And we went to bed, and I woke up to hearing everybody in the basement, and my sister and her husband and my son and my daughter-in-law, they were in the basement, and my sister was screaming that the house was crying because my mother had died. And I looked at her and I said, a pipe froze, turn it off. And it was probably a little bit of both. Elementals are wonderful energies to work with. When I've planted gardens, I've always walked my gardens numbers of times during the day, and I always talk to the elementals and say, this needs work or that needs work. It's a matter of, I warned you.
That's great.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Is it he or a she?
It's a she.
It's a she.
Yeah.
Bless. Yeah. That's super. Absolutely great.
Yeah.
She'll stay in that. Yeah. So elementals in the garden. So literally, you're talking to the elementals as you're as much as you're talking to the actual flower or plant. Is that right?
Yeah. Or garden devas.
Yeah.
I think that you work with house devas. Same thing. It's an elemental. When I put my house up for sale, nobody was coming, and I finally sat down with the house and I explained that I had to sell the house because I couldn't take care of it any longer. And I talked to the house deva, and the next day somebody came and offered me money for the house. So there are energies around, And I've worked with some people that said their house wasn't selling. And I said, but you don't want to sell it. And it doesn't want to let go. And when you're ready, tell the house you're ready and take a jar and take some soil from your yard and take it with you so that you can scatter it in your new home. So you bring that energy with you. And that often works. The air elements are the ones that probably give us, the most problems, because of course that's where the electricity is. And I love thunder and lightning storms because that energy is just so magnificent to sit and experience. But there are energies all over the place. We're never alone. They're always there. And you'll find sometimes that they will hide things. And I found that dowsing when they've played with me helps a lot. And they're I don't know, pixies, fairies, fairy circles, they're all real. Well, at least they are to me. Now, it's kind of like Tinkerbell and Peter Pan. The more you believe, the more you see. And you kind of almost you almost become a part of their creation by believing in them. So,
Yeah.
But they're there. And the Native Americans, stop it. The Native Americans, she's playing with all sorts of things she shouldn't be.
Oh, you got
several
of them. Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, you got several of them then. I thought you only had the one.
No, two.
You got two, yeah. Fantastic. But so the more you believe in them in a way, you're adding to their creation, you're adding to their form, their ability to be there. I mean, there's we will stop shortly, but that you had that fabulous story about your I think that was also after your mother died, when the furniture was moved.
Oh yeah. Oh.
Go on, tell us about that.
I had gone out to a party with a friend of mine, and we came home, and all of the furniture in my living room had been moved to the center. And it was like, she freaked out, and I looked around, and I didn't see anybody, but I knew there were energies there. And I said, that's very cute, please put it back. And she left, and she said, I'm not going to play with this. And I said, I'm not either. They put it there, they can put it back. And I went to bed. And a number of hours later, I heard ka-thump, ka-thump, ka-thump. And I went into the living room, and the furniture was all back. And there was a tissue floating like this, up about 3 feet. And the cats were jumping at it. And I watched it for a while, and it was very sweet. And I finally said, it's 3 a.m. You're welcome to play with them anytime you want, but I'd like to sleep. So we just stopped. And the tissue just floated to the floor. And I went to bed. And from then on, I did, every now and then I would find torn tissue, in places where obviously somebody had played with the cats. I don't know who it was. I do know that I did a meditation group at my house for almost 17 years. And every now and then there was a Confederate soldier who sat in the center of the group at a campfire. And I never got his name. He never left ashes, but the energy was always there. And we're talking New York, and it was a Confederate soldier. So, but you get visitations like that. But I've never had a bad experience with his spirit. So,
No. Not even when you've been called in to help people that are experiencing things in their homes.
I think the most profound one, a family called me in, And he took me through the house, and I said, there's no spirit here, but um, somebody was raped in that room, and it was a family member so it was an emotional trauma that was causing the disturbance. And quite often that's what it is.
Yeah.
I've never at this point met up with any spirit that was unhappy. They were hanging around to watch a child graduate, or they were hanging around because they wanted to be near family longer. They weren't lost. They just weren't gone yet.
Right. Interesting. Because
I mean, I know there are people that do find them. I'm sure they're out there. But
I was actually just trying to think back. You know what it's like when you sort of suddenly think, oh, what cases have I dealt with? And I'm just suddenly thinking back. I mean, the spirits that I come across are generally most of the actual spirits, so the disincarnate souls, should we say, those that have come back as people, many of them are actually just wanting. They have got lost. They have. There is an expression where they do kind of indicate that they want to move on, but they don't know how. And there is quite often a feeling of, they've been too scared to. They made the choice not to go through. So yeah, I mean, I was just trying to think what my experience. But
are they really spirits, or are they shadows?
Yeah.
Because lots of times something is so traumatic that it's like it's imprinted in time.
Yeah.
Shadow.
Yeah.
And yet there is no spirit there.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's dimensional folding, and you're seeing something from another dimension.
Right. That's the dimensional folding has actually just struck a chord, actually. Because we look at thought forms, we look at the historical place memories, and we look at these emotional highlights in everything. We try to kind of narrow down and go through the list. But dimensional folding is a great expression.
It's like a double exposure. So that you've got the picture, but not the spirit.
Right.
So in those cases, when it's a shadow and it's not a spirit, you can't send a shadow someplace because it doesn't have a spirit connected to it. So I don't know, and quite often that stuff, people will come through in period dress and stuff like that. And those you can't communicate with them because they're not there.
Interesting. So that's almost like timelines. Timeline. Yeah. Split. Merging. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Well, let's not dive into that anymore, because we could talk on that for hours. I think it's been an absolute pleasure to share this time with you. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure.
It would be lovely to talk again at some point, maybe later in the year.